The East Coast of the United States has historically been a huge success story for the country. Between 1940 and 2020, the region grew by over 50 million people. But since 2020, more than 400,000 people have left these states. This is despite the entire region having a strong economy with plenty of opportunities and bustling cities. So why have so many people left these places? First, let's rewind and talk about the region's incredible success story throughout history. The East Coast rise began with the establishment of the first permanent English colonies, starting with Jamestown in 1607. This sparked the initial wave of settlement along the coast. Over the next century, more colonies were established, from New England to the Chesapeake Bay and the Carolinas. The East Coast growth was driven by its abundant natural resources, access to the Atlantic Ocean, and its fertile climate, ideal for farming, particularly in areas like the Chesapeake and the Carolinas. By the 18th century, the Atlantic Ocean played a pivotal role, providing direct access to trade routes that connected the colonies to Europe and the Caribbean. Deepwater harbors like those in New York, Boston, and Charleston quickly became vital trade hubs, driving economic expansion. By 1770, the East Coast population surged to over 2 million people, a sharp increase from the roughly 260,000 settlers in 1700. This rise was fueled by the combination of fertile farmland and trade, making the East Coast a prime location for new settlers. In the South, the growth of cash crops like tobacco, rice, and cotton helped fuel the economy. By the mid-1700s, plantations powered much of the Southern economy, with demand for labor being filled by enslaved Africans. This agricultural boom attracted settlers from both Europe and other regions of the U.S., dramatically increasing the Southern population. By 1860, Southern states like Virginia, South Carolina, and Georgia were key to the nation's agricultural output, and the region's population had surged, with Virginia reaching over 1.1 million people, South Carolina nearing 700,000, and Georgia around 600,000. The early 19th century saw another major boom for the East Coast with the completion of the Erie Canal in 1825. Connecting the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean, the canal allowed goods to flow easily from the interior to coastal ports. This infrastructure project sparked massive growth in cities like New York, which by 1900 had grown to over 3 million residents. The canal also solidified New York's role as the nation's primary port and trade hub, driving the region's population growth. By 1900, the East Coast was home to over 40% of the nation's population, as cities expanded and industries grew along the Atlantic shoreline. In short, the East Coast's natural geography, its access to the Atlantic, fertile plains, and deepwater harbors, laid the foundation for its rapid growth. From the rise of early colonies to the agricultural and industrial booms, the region's geographic advantages fueled settlement, trade, and population growth, making it the epicenter of early American development. And the East Coast growth didn't stop with the 19th century. By the mid-1900s, the region was experiencing massive urbanization and industrialization, with cities continuing to expand rapidly. However, the mid-20th century also marked the beginning of significant shifts. As the economy evolved and industries changed, some East Coast cities began to experience slower growth and, in some cases, population decline. So, what's going on? One of the most pressing issues making life on the East Coast increasingly unsustainable is the soaring cost of housing. Over the past decade, cities like New York, Washington, D.C., and Boston have experienced unprecedented increases in housing prices, pushing home ownership and rental affordability beyond the reach of many average workers. According to Harvard Magazine, in 1995, a typical home in the Boston metropolitan area could be nabbed for around $165,000. Today, the same home would cost more than $714,000. In New York, rent has shot up 33% from pre-pandemic levels, compared to a 30% rise nationwide. This exponential rise has made it nearly impossible for middle-class families and young professionals to find affordable housing within the city. Similarly, in Washington, D.C., home prices have skyrocketed, with the average property now reaching around $700,000. Creating a significant barrier for those trying to settle down in the nation's capital. In Northern Virginia, roughly 15 miles southwest of Washington, D.C., the median sold price saw an increase of 10.9% from $700,000 in 2023 to $776,000 in 2024. Middle-class families, public service workers, educators, and even tech professionals find themselves priced out of these urban centers. Many are forced to leave their longtime homes in search of more affordable alternatives elsewhere. States like Florida, North Carolina, and Georgia are increasingly becoming destinations for those seeking a better quality of life at a manageable cost, further contributing to the demographic shifts and economic challenges in these once thriving cities. In fact, in 2024, Florida, Texas, and North Carolina were the country's top 3 states for net migration. But there's more that people are running from than just skyrocketing housing costs. Beyond housing, the overall cost of living on the East Coast has been increasingly burdensome for residents. Everyday goods and services, ranging from groceries to transportation, are significantly more expensive than in many other parts of the country. Gas prices in the Northeast, for example, are routinely above the national average, adding a substantial expense to daily commutes and travel. In 2022, the World Economic Forum listed the 10 states where gas is the most expensive in America. Out of that 10, 3 were in the East Coast: District of Columbia, New York, and Washington. In their list of the 10 states with the least expensive gas, only one East Coast state made the cut: Maryland. Additionally, the cost of groceries has surged by approximately 20% over the past 5 years, making it more difficult for families to stretch their budgets. According to BECU, in 2022, food prices increased almost 10%, faster than in any year since 1979. Now, prices are still increasing, just not as quickly. Food costs in the New York City metropolitan area rose by 56.2% between 2012 to 2013 and 2022 to 2023, more than the 46.4% increase nationally, and inflation has only made these financial pressures worse. As prices for essentials continue to climb, many middle-income families find themselves struggling to keep pace with rising costs. This economic strain is widening the gap between the wealthy and those with modest incomes, leading to greater disparities and a sense of economic insecurity for many residents. The combination of high housing costs and rising everyday expenses is pushing more people to reconsider whether living in these historically lively cities is sustainable in the long term. And sadly, the struggles don't end there. Many cities on the East Coast are experiencing a troubling rise in homelessness. New York and Washington, D.C. are among the cities with the highest homeless populations in the country. In fact, coupled with Hawaii, according to USA Facts, about 771,000 Americans experienced homelessness in January alone. In the District of Columbia, composed entirely of the city of Washington, 80 people experienced homelessness for every 10,000. For comparison, in Arizona, located in the southwest region of the United States, 19.4 people experienced homelessness for every 10,000 in the same time frame. The persistent combination of unaffordable housing and low-paying jobs has driven many individuals and families into homelessness. In New York City alone, over 60,000 people are currently living in shelters, highlighting the severity of the crisis and the growing inability of the city to provide adequate support for its most vulnerable residents. And the city's migrant issue isn't helping. According to the New York Post, migrants staying in emergency shelters throughout the 5 boroughs accounted for almost 88% of the increase in sheltered homelessness in New York in 2024. At the same time, economic inequality continues to widen despite the region's immense wealth. The East Coast has long been a hub of finance, technology, and cultural capital, but the disparity between the rich and the poor remains high. While a small percentage enjoy lavish lifestyles, the majority of the population struggles to meet basic needs like housing, healthcare, and education. This stark contrast fosters social tension and underscores the growing divide that threatens the social fabric of these once thriving urban centers. So, you're probably thinking, surely the East Coast doesn't have to battle anything else, right? Wrong, it does. And it's a battle that isn't always easy to control. In fact, sometimes it's impossible. The East Coast is increasingly vulnerable to extreme weather, particularly hurricanes and flooding, which pose significant threats to residents and infrastructure. Florida, North Carolina, and New Jersey are among the most affected regions, experiencing more frequent and intense storms each year. Florida is the most flood-prone state due to its low elevation, massive coastline, and frequent tropical storms. Here, approximately 2.7 million people live in flood-prone areas. In New Jersey, the state's extensive coastline along the Atlantic Ocean makes it prone to coastal flooding from hurricanes and nor'easters, a powerful storm system that impacts the eastern seaboard of the United States. Inland areas can also experience flooding from heavy rainfall and river overflow. And in North Carolina, an estimated 1 million residents are at risk of flooding due to the state's position along the Atlantic coast. On top of that, the economic repercussions of weather-related disasters on the East Coast are intense, especially for cities situated along the coast. When hurricanes and flooding hit, the cost to repair and rebuild can reach into the billions of dollars.
The administration says the U.S. went through 18 separate multi-billion-dollar climate crises, and it adds up to the number you see there, $165 billion in damages.
Recent storms have caused extensive damage to infrastructure, homes, and businesses, requiring massive investment in recovery efforts. For example, Hurricane Sandy, also known as Superstorm Sandy, significantly impacted the East Coast, particularly states like New Jersey and New York in October 2012. Sandy made landfall near Atlantic City, New Jersey during the early evening of 29th of October as one of the most intense and damaging storms ever to affect the East Coast of the USA. Sustained surface winds at landfall were close to 80 miles per hour, with gusts between 85 and 95 miles per hour. According to National Geographic, Hurricane Sandy is considered the fourth most expensive storm in U.S. history, and more than 600,000 housing units were destroyed in New Jersey and New York. The government of New York City estimates that $19 billion in damage was inflicted on the city alone. These repeated disasters strain local budgets, inflate insurance premiums, and often lead to increased taxes or government aid to cover the costs. Over time, the financial burden hampers economic growth, discourages new investments, and makes it increasingly difficult for communities to recover and thrive in the face of a changing climate. Also, while renters are difficult to track after hurricanes, it is known that they are more likely to experience long-term displacement. Research shows that rental units suffer more damage and recover about half as quickly as owner-occupied housing. While economic and climate pressures are making life increasingly difficult on the East Coast, another critical issue intensifying these hardships is overcrowding and traffic congestion. Major cities like New York, Washington, D.C., and Boston are infamous for their traffic jams, with residents often spending hours each week trapped in gridlock. According to the New York Post, New Yorkers are having to endure a staggering 236 hours, or 10 full days, stuck in rush hour traffic per year. And Boston is the 12th most congested city worldwide, with drivers losing an average of 79 hours in traffic in 2024. This not only heightens daily frustration, but also diminishes overall quality of life, impacting everything from work productivity to mental health. Public transportation, which is vital in these densely populated areas, is struggling to keep pace with demand. The aging subway system in New York and the metro in DC frequently face overcrowding, delays, and maintenance issues. In 2017, it was reported that overcrowding accounted for more than one-third of the nearly 75,000 subway delays across the system each month. In January 2025, the New York subway saw a daily average ridership of 3.2 million, a 10% increase from 2.9 million during the equivalent period in January 2024. These challenges make it difficult for commuters to travel efficiently, forcing many to endure uncomfortable and unreliable journeys every day. Adding to the strain is the increasing influx of new residents, drawn by the region's economic opportunities. As more people move in, often from more affordable states, the already stretched infrastructure and public services are under even greater pressure. Schools, hospitals, and transit systems are operating at or beyond capacity, making it harder for cities to maintain their livability and meet the needs of their growing populations. With all of these problems in mind, there is an intense political divide taking place as many people feel unhappy with their way of life. Major cities like New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. are often seen as liberal strongholds, advocating progressive policies and social reforms. In contrast, many surrounding states and suburbs lean more conservative, creating a stark ideological split across the region. This divergence fuels tensions, making regional cooperation on critical issues harder and harder. As the East Coast has become a battleground for political debates, rising polarization hampers efforts to find common ground and implement effective solutions to the region's pressing problems. This deepening divide has also contributed to a rise in social unrest. Protests, demonstrations, and even riots have become more common as communities express their frustrations over issues such as economic inequality, policing practices, and racial justice. So, what is the future looking like for the East Coast? As the challenges facing the region continue to mount, many residents are choosing to relocate to more affordable and livable areas. States like Texas, Georgia, and North Carolina are experiencing an influx of East Coast migrants seeking lower housing costs, less congestion, and a better quality of life. According to NAIOP, the southern U.S. has been a migration hotspot for over a decade, attracting hundreds of thousands of new residents each year. While Florida long held the top spot for net migration, 2023 saw Texas take the lead, welcoming nearly 138,000 new residents. Furthermore, according to Newsweek, the East Coast state of New Jersey saw its residents move out of the region at a higher rate than any other state in 2023. Led by retirees in search of more affordable and temperate climates to spend their end-of-work days. This was the 6th year in a row that New Jersey led the country in outward migration, as 65% of resident moves were outbound. This migration trend signals a potential demographic shift that could reshape the region's economic and cultural landscape in the years to come. Despite these difficulties, efforts are underway to address some of the core issues threatening the East Coast's vitality. Proposed solutions include expanding affordable housing initiatives, investing in modernizing and expanding public transportation systems, and implementing comprehensive climate adaptation policies to mitigate the effects of rising sea levels and extreme weather events. A standout initiative is the SHOP program, which provides grants to nonprofits to help develop affordable housing units for low-income buyers. These measures aim to make the region more resilient and livable, but they require significant time, investment, and political will to realize. However, the road to recovery and renewal will not be quick or easy. With mounting pressures from economic, environmental, and social challenges, it remains uncertain whether the East Coast can preserve its status as one of America's most desirable places to live. The coming years will be critical in determining whether the region can adapt and thrive amid these ongoing transformations. So, living on the East Coast has become more challenging than ever before. Yet, it remains as one of the most influential and historically significant regions in the United States. As it faces mounting economic, environmental, and social pressures, only time will tell how it will adapt to these challenges, and whether it can maintain its status as a premier place to live and work. What do you think about the future of the East Coast? Can it overcome these obstacles and thrive once again? What about why living in Japan has become impossible?